Hello, friends and fellow lovers of all things beachy. Welcome to The Beach Speaks, the podcast that shares stories about the beach and our connection to it. I'm your host and beach lover, Paige Friend, helping you reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. So grab a cool drink, relax in your beach chair, stick your toes in the sand, and enjoy this episode of The Beach Speaks. Hey, beach lover. Recently on The Beach Speaks, I posted an episode sharing my beach story as a guest on Rabiah Kuhn's podcast, More Than Work. And today I'm bringing Rabiah back, this time as my guest, to hear her beach story. Rabiah currently lives in London, but she grew up near the beach in California. And when she said she was coming home for the holidays, I thought it would be the perfect time to share her story on the podcast. For many of us, this is a time for sharing with family and friends. And when you listen to her story, you'll find out that family and friends are two very important things in Rabiah's life. In this conversation, Rabiah talks about what it was like growing up at the beach in Southern California and how the beach continues to show up even when she's landlocked. We also talk about her side gig as a stand-up comic and the important role that service plays in her life. After hearing Rabiah's story, I think you'll understand why her podcast is called More Than Work. It's a reflection of a way of living that we all can aspire to. Hey, Rabiah. Welcome to The Beach Speaks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Paige.
Yeah. We had a conversation and I dropped that episode and I thought, okay, this would be fun if you and I got back on and you got to tell your side of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah. And a little bit about your beach life, because you did live on the West Coast and you're heading back there, right? You're back in the States and you had been living in London. So interesting to hear about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll start out with the question I ask everybody. And how is the beach speaking to you today?
Oh, I'd say I just heard from a friend in San Diego, actually, one of my best friends, and I'm planning to see her as part of my trip back to the States. And we were just talking about being picked up from the train station. It would be in Solana Beach is where the train station I'll go into. And actually, it's a beautiful ride from Los Angeles, where I'll be, down to Solana Beach. And you do go along the coast a bit and get to see it. And it's kind of one of my favorite sites, I guess, on the West Coast. But I think there's more, there's like some spectacular views if you go up north to Big Sur and things like that. But down in San Diego, it's wonderful. So I guess just kind of already the feeling of like being home is what the beach is doing for me today. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly that feeling. I did not know that there was a train that went up the coast. Wow.
Yeah. The Surf Rider or Surfliner, it's Amtrak. And so when I was in college, I went to college in San Diego and I grew up north of LA. I would take the train quite a bit, and which in times change. I mean, it was like $16 back then and now it's 40, but yeah, I would do that ride, and there's this whole bit where you just kind of in Encinitas and things like that, where you see the coast. It's nice, and then you can go further up. I mean, you can go all over the place on the train. I just don't usually have time to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because a few years ago, Ernie and I made a trip down the California coast. I always wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We started in San Francisco area and then came all the way down in Big Sur. Oh my goodness, we didn't plan to spend enough time there. we've always said we need to go back there. And we stopped in LA because my brother and sister-in-law live there. San Diego area has always been one of my favorite places to go.
Yeah.
Did you always live on the West Coast, or tell me about what your life was like there?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in what they call the high desert in California, just north of LA, in this area called Santa Clarita. And then when I was 18, I went down to San Diego for college, to UC San Diego, and that's in La Jolla. And so I grew up basically in the desert. I mean, it was hot, but not as hot as like if you go to Palm Springs or something. And then when I moved to San Diego, I mean, I've never been a beach person in the sense of like tanning. I'm very, very pale, and I don't tan. I burn, and I don't burn and then tan. I just burn and then white. So, and it's, dangerous to do that
Yeah.
anyway. So we would spend time when I was a kid. My dad had a boat, a cabin cruiser, and so we would go to Oxnard, the Channel Islands Harbor specifically, and we would go there quite often on a Sunday. And so I spent a lot of time on the boat, and he would let us steer the boat or drive the boat. We're out in the ocean. You would kind of, try to keep things pointed to a target. And so I liked the ocean from that perspective. I didn't really have that fear people have of like being out in the water, because it was just, we were used to that. And so that was more the, I guess, ocean experience I had, or beach experience. And we'd walk over to the beach. So I've always liked walking on the beach, but I've never been like a laying on the beach. And we used to have boogie boards and go out. I mean, there was no talent to it at that point. You're just kids running out with your boogie boards and getting sandy and stuff. And so yeah, we did that almost every weekend. It was fun. And I mean, the water is cold. The Pacific Ocean's cold, but when you're a kid, you don't really care.
Yeah, I know about that. When we visited some family and we went to Newport Beach, Seal Beach, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the waves being so incredibly high. Of course, I was, maybe 7, 8 years old, and, so it wasn't very tall. And diving under the waves and it being so cold, but hours and hours, it just did not matter. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it's great. And you just have this massive, body of water in front of you wherever you are by an ocean. And when I went to college down in San Diego as La Jolla, I mean, we could walk from UCSD over to, well, there's Black's Beach, which is the nude beach, right? I never went to. So no confession about that there. But there was also in La Jolla Shores, that wasn't really walkable, but there were these seals, like a children's playground. These seals would be up there. The smell was horrible, but there was something just cool about seeing them that close. And I wouldn't say I went to the beach much, but when my mom would come down, we'd drive down and have lunch or breakfast or whatever at a cafe in La Jolla. And there's always being near the coast. But I think really the way I used the beach then, and the way it was kind of something that I related to, is later on in school, when I had my car down there, I would just drive down at night to Del Mar, and you could, well, I don't know if you could. I mean, they're not going to find me now, but I would sit in the lifeguard tower and just like I don't think I had a beer because I would been driving, but I would just sit there and like, I remember, the feeling of wearing a hoodie when it's just like you're wearing shorts and a hoodie because it's just a little bit cold, and just sitting there and watch the waves come in the relatively dark, but the moon does a lot of cool stuff at night by the beach and makes it pretty light. And so I would just do that. I mean, when I needed to get away, like I was kind of horrible because I would get home from work at night, and if I saw the light on in my apartment, it meant someone was awake and probably going to want to talk to me, and I didn't want to do that. And so isn't that horrible? I know, awful. And I would drive down and just sit. But I just needed, and there was like one or two friends I would maybe let know that they could come with me, but it was really my thing. And that was my beach because no one was there. And it just kind of has always grounded me. And so now I live in London, and there's some water. I mean, there's the Thames River and there's a canal near me, but I just find the water very grounding. But I think probably that was when I was dealing with the start of some maybe depression and stuff too, but the water just kind of made me feel better. Just being near it. So I don't like being landlocked. I lived in Dallas for a while. I did not like being landlocked.
Oh, yeah, I totally get it. I like the idea of my beach because I feel the same way about my beach here. I don't like to share it, but I have to.
Yeah.
And when the tide's out, there's a pretty wide stretch of beach. So there could be a number of people around, but it's not like you're shoulder to shoulder and in each other's way. And especially in the morning when I like to go out, it's pretty calm, and I can kind of sit in a space that's mine and not feel like anybody's encroaching on my space and I'm not on theirs. Anyway, so I get that going to the beach, going to the ocean, to the water is really helpful because it did that for me as well. And that was one thing when I was going through some difficulties with my parents. They moved to Clearwater Beach and they were aging. And then my mother had passed away suddenly from a stroke. And then I was having to deal with my father, and the beach was really close. It was maybe 5 miles away. And I just could not wait to get there. Just plop down on the sand and take a breath and think, okay, just be here. And it was just, I totally get how that would help. And it's funny because you just kind of know, your body knows. And speaking of my father, when you were talking about where you would be going, my father grew up in the LA area. And of course, my brother lives in Altadena, so he's not super close to the beach, and they're not really beachy people, so that's okay. But my father, I'm sure, had wonderful beach stories to tell, and I don't know any of them. So I know very little of his life in Southern California, except picking avocados off the tree in their backyard. He talked about that all the time. Yeah, so I'm thinking, oh gosh, I wish I had those stories to tell. But I was curious, how was it like when you were younger?
I remember so much of it, right? Like, basically, we would go down, we're going to the boat. That's what we would say. We wouldn't say going to Ventura or something. We're going to the boat. And then my mom would say, oh, bring your stuff if you guys want to go to the beach. And then my dad, I don't know. He still does that. He's at 84 now. It's crazy, but he would just like always be fixing something. I think it's also the thing that I don't know how fixed anything was, because it always needed to be fixed. So he would be fine just be on the boat by himself anyway. And then I remember sometimes he would drive the boat down past all the docks to this like mini mall, shopping center. And there was like pizza there and whatever. And there was frozen yogurt. And that's when, I don't know if frozen yogurt is a big a deal now. I don't think it is, but it was such a big deal then, right? Because I'm in my mid 40s. So this was more than 30 years ago. And so we'd get that. And then we'd bring our stuff. And then my mom would have we'd walk to the beach, and you just basically cross the street, like 2 streets at the beach. And then we would make our way back down and get back to the dock. And it was just kind of like, that was one thing. Or we just walk from the dock to the beach. I remember that whole thing of when you're crossing the street, it was 3 of us. There's always one kid who's not going to be doing what they're supposed to do, crossing the street, or they'd run ahead or whatever. And I just remember even on the beach too, my brother would run ahead. I was certainly, I'll never run. So it was no problem. I might've been well behaved, but I also wasn't going to run. So it was just kind of both. But yeah, and then we just, we'd get to run ahead onto the beach and get to the water as fast as you could, throw your towel down, And
I ask because we have some young grandchildren. The older ones are just kind of on the brink of being able to ride their bikes somewhere. Mm-hmm. The beach is just 7-8 blocks just down the street, so not too difficult. But there is that one big road that's like super busy, and we just can't let them go across there on their own. They're not the type to just run out there anyway. And I'm thinking about them later on in life, reminiscing about how I ride my bike and go over to the beach, because I did not have that. Yeah. I lived in the mountains of Pennsylvania, so I envy anybody that was able to just go.
Yeah, we were quite lucky. I don't think at the time I would have said that, because sometimes I just want to stay home. And, as a kid, I'd like to just read and do that kind of thing. And that was my thing, and a little bit different than my family that way. And so I didn't appreciate it necessarily. But then my mom, when they moved to California from Missouri, she told us she would walk barefoot around Santa Monica and walk down to the beach and stuff. It's crazy to think of your mom, my mom's she's not stuck up or something, but really proper. Her hair's always done. She would die if she saw me on the camera right now, because I'm just have my hair back and whatever. But she, always wears shoes certainly now and everything, and or sandals. Actually, she doesn't. She always wears sandals. She hates wearing shoes still. But she said, yeah, they used to walk around barefoot, which I think is wild to think my mom in the like late 60s walking around barefoot in Santa Monica. But it's just cool, like that she. I don't know. I never experienced my mom that way. I always experienced her in a completely different way. Like I wish we could remember when we were like two, or what or something. My grandma's cousin had come out to visit with their granddaughter. And so this kid was probably, I don't know. I mean, I would have to check, but between 10 and 13 or something, and never seen the beach before. And so seeing someone, and I was older, like late teens, seeing someone experience the beach for the first time is incredible, because there's so much joy. Yeah, and that was cool. And then I think I realized then, like, wow, I was lucky. And even talking to you now, like, I was very lucky to get to do that. And I love California, so I was lucky I think, to grow up in Southern California anyway, just because there's so much different topography or whatever. But no, I think it's very lucky to grow up in Southern
Mhm.
California and just have that
Yeah, you were
experience.
talking about the seals. Did you ever have like an encounter of the marine kind of your own, like swimming and finding a random dolphin?
No, not none of that. I mean, we saw them in the water, like when we'd be out in the ocean on the boat, we saw dolphins before. I remember. I
Mhm.
never saw whale. We saw dolphins. That's cool. And even more recently, I was in Laguna Beach. Well, this is probably 5 years ago now. A family friend has a house there. We did some like boat thing and saw them dolphins. That was really cool. But no, I remember I didn't really know. I saw jellyfish before, which that's scary because you don't want them to sting you. We would always collect shells though, or something, and
Oh, tell me about that.
well, it's kind of like again when you're a kid, it's just like a prize, like this. Oh, I got a shell, and then sometimes you get one you could hear out of. And I remember my parents would go to Hawaii every year too, so I remember my mom brought back a big shell, but like it was mostly like clam shells. I think we'd get. They weren't spectacular, but it was still cool. Like you would just try to see what you could get.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get like a whole bucket full and want to take it home? And your mom was like, you can't take all that home. What are you going to do with it?
Well, yeah, because there's so much sand. So you would sneak it. I remember you'd always end up with a pocket full of sand because you sneak all this stuff in your pockets and think no one's gonna know, and then you're getting sand everywhere.
Oh, for
Like the
sure.
sand
For
always gives
sure.
you away.
I remember justifying bringing home this whole bag full of shells because I was going to make like shell jewelry. I was going to decorate a jewelry box or a picture frame or something like that, which I probably was. I was kind of into arts and crafts and that sort of thing at the time. So my mother said, well, okay, you can bring it back. And I meticulously laid out all these shells and I painted them with clear nail polish because I wanted them to look like they were wet, all that stuff. And I didn't think about the fact that the nail polish was sticky and they stuck to the paper towel that I most of them, so I couldn't
Oh
like
my
peel
god.
them off. It was a disaster, the whole thing. I don't know where it broke my heart to just like have to toss these things because the shells. I'm still that way. We
I
have
know.
shark's teeth here that you can look for.
Oh
I am
wow.
terrible at finding them. I have yet maybe once to see them. They're typically really small at this one beach that we have, but the kids have they'll just look down and oh there's one, and I mean it would be like the tiniest thing. How do you see that? And they said you just kind of have to like blur your vision, and once you see one then you see them everywhere. And I went okay. Still eludes me. um, we don't have those big conch shells like the ones you can listen to. I think further up the coast
Yeah.
near in North Carolina in that area, I see somebody on Instagram that's always picking up those beautiful big shells that you can talk. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
one of
cool.
my beach bucket items is to collect some more shells from different places. I do have buckets and bags full of shells now, and every once in a while I get them out and I'll like shell dazzle something. Like there's a table in our back room, and I have all the shells in kind of jars and things like that. And every once in a while I'll get them out and I'll spread them around, like, this design or something like that. So,
Well, they're like tactile because they'll be really smooth on one side and then some kind of texture on the other. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, they're nice, and I think they're nice material, whatever it is. I don't know what they're made out of, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, but their shell, I guess. I don't know what that is, but yeah, it's kind of cool,
Yeah.
you know. I just started like looking at my fingernails. I'm like, I thought how creepy that would, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's better to keep shells. So I think they're probably a similar thing. They're just protecting
Yeah.
something,
They're
but
just
yeah,
kind of building up their little home. And then when they grow out of it,
yeah,
they
they're
go
so
and
cool.
find another.
Yeah, they're great.
Okay. Well, see, finding another home, you're not in California right now, or you are for the holidays, but you're living in London. Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so my day job is as a, well, at the time was a project manager for IT projects, like building websites and whatever for a consultancy. And so essentially I kept getting sent to Europe or the UK for different projects. Like one time I was in Madrid for 3 months, and then another time I was in London for a month, and then I was home for a month and back in London. And so finally my company just said, we seem to need you on site over there a lot. Would you like to just live over there for a little while? And they'll sponsor the visa. And so it took a lot. I'm in pretty close to my family and friends, and so it took a lot. But it was, yeah. I mean, the opportunity is extraordinary to live in another country, and so I did it, and that was 4 years ago. And since then, I've changed jobs at my company, so I'm still in my company. I do marketing now, but it's just really cool. And so that is one of those things where I don't think I dreamt about it because I didn't think it was possible. I thought about moving to London because I was seeing someone like, oh, well, 15 years ago, but that was only my thought, not theirs. Like he did not have the same idea, so that didn't happen. But it was just, for that reason, but I never thought I'd actually do it. I mean, once you think about moving somewhere, it's hard not to think about it. So it's cool that it happened, and I love it there. It's a different lifestyle. I love the cities. I lived in New York City before, so that was the closest experience to that. But I love it. I mean, there's things that drive me nuts, you know, but just like there are anywhere you live, and it's cool to be there. So yeah, I like it. And then the proximity to Europe's great. And so I've gotten to go a few places over time, but I moved right before the pandemic. So I spent, I was there for 2 months before lockdown started.
Yeah, so you didn't
And
have much time to explore.
no, and I think that was actually a benefit to me because then the exploring I did of the city was when it was completely desolate and I was on my bicycle. And it
Mm.
was just a completely different view than I'd ever get of the city because certainly it's not like that now. It's buzzing. And I also didn't have any routines or people I would miss or anything because I had nothing established in London. So I think I was a bit lucky because I didn't mourn the loss of something. And then the only time that really happened for me was when it was the holiday time and I couldn't go home. And I had been home for every single holiday my whole life. So that was weird, but otherwise it was, I thought I was pretty lucky, honestly.
Hmm. Did you start your podcast then?
I did. So just before I'd moved to England, I'd started comedy, doing stand-up comedy, which is one thing I do at night. And I was doing online gigs like Zoom gigs, which is horrible. Horrible but character building. And then I just kind of still had time. I mean, the thing was there was an abundance of time. I was working full time, but you no commute, not going anywhere, not going out at all. You just have a lot of time. And so then I just thought about, well, it was the US election. I won't get into it, but the US election was going on at the time too. And I just thought about what am I doing to serve? And I was doing a lot of work calling for candidates and stuff like that, but I just kept thinking about it. And I had a podcast years before with some friends. And so I just kind of thought about what am I doing? And I started to see some friends had lost jobs. And I just had this theme, my podcast is more than work, but I had this theme running through also of having to refine balance again because I started working crazy hours because I had
Hmm.
nothing else to do, quote unquote. And so I think this is a very long way of saying, yes, I started my podcast during that time, but it was the result of a lot of reflection and also a couple key things that happened where I said, wow, they've been serving their entire life and what am I doing? And then me thinking, what could I do? And I think the podcast is my one way of doing that. I just talk to people about what they do and how your self-worth is more than your job title. Because I think a lot of things shifted where people probably who were workaholics got worse at it. And
Hmm.
but yeah, and so I just had the time and so we were talking before the podcast about I don't have as much time now, and so I've had to accept that I've changed my cadence of releasing episodes. But yeah, I think it's so wonderful to podcast. I mean, like you have a passion about the beach, you get to talk to people about that. I have a passion about people pursuing their dreams. And I mean, one reason you were on is just because of what you've done in your life. One reason you're on my podcast, but it's just a cool way to communicate. And it made me feel more connected in some ways too.
Yeah. And I think that there are people out there listening to podcasts that don't realize the amount of time and energy and resources it takes to put a podcast together. It used to be when things were simpler, I guess, and people were just starting a podcast, they'd just pick up their iPhone and talk into it and then download it to some program, and then it went off, and people were saying that, that's okay. You can start with an iPhone. And now we're so sophisticated in our listening that the sound has to be good. And if you do video, like we don't, because I'm not ready for that, then that's just a whole other ball of wax,
Well, I think it's a matter of what you're doing too. I guess for me, I transcribe, which I think we're both using Descript now. I've been using Descript for quite a while, but I want everything I do to be of good quality. And so that means editing out things that will just make it difficult for the listener to hear, not to edit out to change meaning and stuff. But if someone says the word like 472 times in 45 minutes, that's going to be hard for the listener to hear. So at least you can cut out 272 of those. And then, having the transcript is important for accessibility. And then just having, like we were talking earlier about the audio levels being right, so we had to run it through another process, and all that just takes time. And then having show notes. And I mean, I've started using AI a little bit, and I was definitely a no on that. And now I'm like, you know what? I need the time back. But some people hire editors. And then I had this one person on my podcast who, it was funny because I had been on hers, and she put up the episode within like a half hour of us recording. And I was like, oh my God. And she goes, well, I don't edit. I think it should be natural that they hear. And I said, well, that's fine. But there was a point in the podcast where she asked a question I didn't understand, and we had a back and forth. And I thought I would have definitely cut that out for my listeners, and she didn't. And that's fine. That's her style. But I think you can still just post raw footage up online, or you can do a lot with it. And for me, an episode that's between 45 minutes and an hour takes me about 8 hours of time. By the time I think about recording, editing, refining the transcription, publishing, and then creating the assets for social, and also updating my website. I mean, it takes time. And communicating, I think you're really good about communicating before, and I strive for the same thing. And so I think, then it can take a long time.
Yeah, it does. It does. I struggle with the sound.
Yeah.
I want to hear something good.
Well, with the listeners, I mean, some people are playing it on their listening device at home or speakers, but some people, you're in their ear, you're like actually inside their head. And it's a privilege. I mean, I'm always like grateful with people just seeing the numbers. Well, I mean, my numbers aren't huge, but still, like, even say 50 people listen to an episode. That's an hour of their time that they gave me and my guest, and probably in a very intimate way.
I know. It is a really intimate space, and I often think about the podcasters that I listen to, and you feel like you know them. And that if you saw them on the street, you could just walk up and say, hey, have you ever had anybody, I don't know, stop you on the street and say, Rabiah, you're...
I've had it with comedy once. That was weird. But with the podcast, I had someone, one of my friends say something. I was like, did I tell you that? And I thought, oh God, I told everyone that, didn't I? I was like, how do you know that? Because I thought, I know who I told. And I thought, oh gosh, I just mentioned it on my podcast.
Yeah. My friend from high school texted me yesterday and said, oh my gosh, I listened to the episode with Rabiah and I heard the taxidermy part, and she just started cracking up because where I grew up, that was a big deal. And people would, when they caught the deer, they sent it to the taxidermy to have the head mounted.
Yeah.
And some people even like made lamps with the legs, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff, it was, we were just laughing, and I don't know, it just kind of brings up things that just made me think of something. Oh, the comedy. Tell me about that. How did you get into that? And what's it like? And is this just something that you do like to torture yourself? Because that's how it would be for me to stand up and try to be funny would just, I don't know. I don't think it would work for me.
I think, I mean, I I've had to think about this a lot lately, just 'cause I've been thinking about what I'm doing with it. I don't know about you, but I think you're similar to me where it's hard to do something and dedicate yourself to it without having a purpose for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I started it, well, about, 4 years ago, essentially. And it's kind of one of those things, a couple things. Like, one, if you talk to my high school friends, I was always cracking people up in class. And I wasn't a class clown because I did very, I was a straight A, like, nerd. Well, I would get in trouble in class, but just for stupid things like jokes. Like, we were in this mixed class where it was the honors kids and the not honors kids, whatever, the regular class. And the teacher expected us to set a good example, which I think is in a way silly because, like, just because we happen to be just more inclined towards school, which is really what it is. I mean, there's very smart people who aren't in honors classes because that's not the way they learn, right?
Yeah,
So it
they're just
wasn't even
not
that
into
we're
it.
smarter
Yeah.
necessarily, that we have to act better, and why. And so I remember we were watching Gandhi, that movie, with Ben Kingsley. I thought it was abysmal. It was so boring, right? And I mean, at the time anyway. And so I started drawing. She said, "You guys need to take notes," which was so dumb. Take notes in a movie that we're not studying film. We're studying Gandhi and, like, make
Right.
us read about him. And so I drew the many hairstyles of Gandhi because he had all these. And so then my friends were cracking up. So I got kicked out of class for that.
The many hairstyles of Gandhi. Wasn't he bald the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but he had different, like, facial hair and stuff. And so, I mean, it was easy to draw. I'm not an artist. And so just cracking stupid comments. And I think, not, I won't get into too much of it. I think I've used humor really as a defense. And I don't think that's unusual. In stressful or tenuous situations, used it either to crack up my siblings or to other people or whatever. And, like, I do think you can laugh at a funeral. And then it was one of those things too where friends would always say, "Oh, you should do comedy. You should do comedy." And I admired comedians. I mean, David Letterman, I watched all the time. Like, just actually, I've watched his stand up recently. It's not very good, to be honest with
Oh.
you, but he was good at hosting the show.
Mm-hmm.
And all that to say, when I was 30 something, early 30s, I said, "Okay, I'll do it by the time I'm 40." That was my answer to anyone who said, and it would come up frequently enough where I said it many times. And then I have this thing where I definitely don't want to disappoint people or lie, so I had to do it. And so just before I was 40, I took a comedy course, 6-week course, which anyone who wants to start comedy does not need to do a course, but that's what I chose to do. And then got on stage for the first time. And then I just kind of kept doing it because it was cool. I mean, the first joke I wrote, I always still tell almost every gig I do. It's fantastic. And it's a fantastic way to express yourself and to write and all that. And so I do it. I've only said it a few times, and it's hard for me to say, but this is what I want to do.
Mm.
I want to be a writer, and I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I just didn't have the guts to do it, so I ended up in IT. But yeah, the comedy writing and the stand up, I mean, they're definitely what I want to do, at least as part of my paid work. I don't get paid for it right now, but
Yeah. I could see you back in New York on SNL writing in the writer's
yeah, I
room.
mean, even the worst skit, they put so much time into it, probably.
I know. I know. Well, so people know that you do stand up. If you just have a regular get together, say you're just all having dinner or somewhere or whatever, is does somebody just say, "Rabiah, be funny"? I mean, do they always
No,
like
oh my
expect
god.
you to, "Hey,
And
tell us a joke, be
yeah,
funny"?
well, people do that. Like, oh, especially like on dating sites too. "Oh, am I going to be in your routine?" And I'm like, "No." And then, so what I write? I'm so rude, Paige. This is why I'm single. One of the reasons. I'll write back and I'll be like, "No, I wouldn't want to bore the audience." But only if I'm not interested
Oh.
anyway. I'm like, why is that the first? It's like, so this is like definitely a thing that, specifically when I talk to men, because I talk to men and women online, and the women have never done this. I don't talk to that many people anyway, but the men have done this mostly. Am I going to be part of your routine? Why is it when you find out I do stand up comedy, your first question is, "Are you going to be in my comedy?" Why isn't it like, "Oh, how long have you been going?" or "Is it hard?" or blah blah blah. But it's always like about them being in the routine. It's like, no, you're not going to be in my calendar either at this point. But people will, especially like in person, they'll, "Oh, tell me a joke." And so I just go, "I don't work for free," which I do, to be honest. And I'll say, "Oh, you should come see me." That's all I'll say.
Well, that's a good response.
All of us deal, like every comic, doesn't matter, male, female, whatever, non-binary, whatever comic,
Mm-hmm.
they all deal with the same thing of people wanting us to tell them a joke, and it's like, no, because I can't, because I'm not on stage. Like, but I'll be funny. Like we were at dinner last night, and I'm with these three friends, and I'll be the funny. Like I think everyone's funny. People say they're not funny. I think everyone's funny, and everyone makes people laugh. But like, I'll definitely just slide in with ridiculous, dry comments. And I do think that I've honed that skill, you know?
There is something to be said about making people laugh
Oh,
and
yeah.
injecting that humor. You know, sometimes it's self-effacing and maybe you're covering up for something, but
Hmm.
I I love it when I can say random things and people laugh. I'm not thinking that I'm going to do stand up by any means. We have people in our family that are more likely to do something like that if anybody,
Yeah.
but it's more like you just say random things that are funny and you can't like manufacture that. It just like comes out.
Well, my mom, and I'm really close to my mom, but she does not like comedy.
Really?
And so she says, well, Robbie, I just don't laugh. And she'll say, oh, I'm glad you're doing it for you, and stuff. But then she will laugh at stuff I say. Like when I was home for Thanksgiving and we were walking in the mall and she said, stop. She's like, just stop it. But I wasn't saying anything specific. It was just anything I said is, and I kind of get like that kind of way, like this sort of neurotic type or whatever sometimes. And so, but she's like, stop it, quit making me laugh. Like my leg hurts. So then I like couldn't say anything. And then I just kind of, no one can see, but I was just kind of like looking at her with a side eye, like kind of, well, I won't say anything. And then she's like laughing. She'll just stop it. And it's like nothing I could do.
Yeah.
I think humor, one thing too, is like it disarms situations and can endear you to people, maybe, which is fun. We were at Thanksgiving and my sister's ex husband and his mom were there, which I think is nice that everyone can do that. And then the kids are with both parents on the holiday and stuff. But her ex has always appreciated my humor, I think. So my sister, she makes the pies and I do gluten free. And so I always get a different pie. And she goes, oh, do you like this one better than last year? Last year was crustless. And I was like, it was what? And she goes, it was crustless. I go, so it was pudding? And he just started laughing. And we were just, and it's so stupid, but it's like, what are you talking about? A crustless pot? What is that? And we were just cracking up. And I didn't mean it to be funny, but it just was. And then,
Yeah.
and my sister too, I think she'd get annoyed with me sometimes, but I made her laugh, so she can't.
I I'm thinking about you making a joke about the shells and like what the heck are they made of?
Yeah, well, then that was what my brain was doing. My brain was going, well, I just thought, like, if you, like, and I know it's gross to think about someone collecting fingernails. If you think about other things like a shell, like, you don't keep them,
Right.
Like, we don't keep packaging, like you wouldn't keep the paper a fish came in, for example. You'll keep a shell of a clam, like a different kind of fish. Weird. So strange. Like, oh, it's art. Nature's art.
So you're going to keep your day job until your stand-up job comes about, your writing.
Probably till retirement age.
Well, you can keep your day job if you can manage it and do something else. It's not like you have to do one or the other. And maybe that's a way of getting some balance in your life too, because you have your serious nerdy
Yeah.
kind of side, and that needs to be, and it's creative in a way when you do marketing, but kind of in a tech way. I imagine it
Yeah.
has to be a certain way, but then you have that other side where you can bring some creative energy and levity into people's lives and kind of lighten up and bring that. So I can see the balance going.
Yeah, and I think even I'm doing marketing because my boss knew what I was doing with comedy, and he just said, you can learn the marketing part. You're a good writer, and you care, and you get things done, and that's what we need. And you can figure out the rest. And so, it is a result of me doing the other thing that I'm in this role now. I mean, I used humor at work anyway. I mean, probably inappropriately, but I still did. So it's but yeah, you're right, and I think there's a certain thing that is necessary with salary, especially when you're single. It's like you need to support yourself, and so if the way to do that is to work two jobs or whatever, then that's
Yeah.
and it's certainly not what I'm doing is not as hard as actually working two jobs, and there's a whole socioeconomic thing around that. But yeah, I work in IT. I'm lucky that I work remotely, so my hours allow me. I don't have to work till 10 at night, and so I can do the podcast. I can do the work, and it's good.
So, do you envision yourself in London permanently?
It's hard for me to know like too far ahead what I'm going to be doing, just because so many things. I've been so open to unexpected opportunities and stuff. But I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely, my goal is to be in London, at least get dual citizenship, and then have the option. And I really like it there, and I think it's a good place for me. But I also have family in California and in the States and friends, and so ideally I'd be able to spend time both places, and especially I'd be home when I'm needed at home, and be away when I'm not. And
Yeah, comes the best of both worlds in a way. Is there any beach in your area that you'd like to visit? Brighton Beach or?
yeah, I go to Brighton. I was just in Brighton. I took my friend down to Brighton when she was visiting in October, and I'm going to be gigging there quite a bit next year. So, yeah, it's a different beach, so it's the rocks, but it's really pretty, and you get the whole thing of hearing the waves and stuff. But I do realize I prefer Sandy Beach, and I went to Cornwall and saw the beach there, and I didn't realize people surf in England, and I did stand up paddleboarding for the first time. And I mean, in London, really, I just walk along the canal and stuff. But people call, oh my gosh, it's so funny, by the Thames River, people go, "Oh, I'm going to the beach," and they just mean by the river, and I think that's so funny. Oh, how cute!
Oh my goodness. I just want to wrap this up with, yeah, be funny. No, I'm
Oh,
not,
great.
tell a joke now.
Yeah,
No, I know that you're very service oriented and that what you do has to really, in your mind, really be serving a purpose for the greater good
yeah.
or what have you. And I'm curious to know, what are you doing today? What's on your mind that you really want to spend your time in service of? And then maybe would be inspiring to my listeners to, what can I do to give back? Because that's how I've been with the podcast. It's like, I've got this beautiful life going on, or I just need to share it, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, service is very important to me, and I dedicate, I'd say, quite a few hours to it. I volunteer at a charity shop back where I live in London, and I volunteer with the MS Society and with another MS. I have multiple sclerosis, so I volunteer. Not because you have a disease, you don't necessarily volunteer with them, but I do because I think they're doing things to help improve the lives of people with MS, and I just want to help with that. But I think, like today, that's a good question. What am I going to do? I mean, I did make breakfast tacos for my friends. I'll say I did that. That was serving their stomachs.
Yeah.
Actually, I did see some emails come in from the one MS organization, so I might write back to them. When I can't do something in direct service of maybe the world or whatever, I think one thing that's important is just to like, yeah, just check in with someone, or, like, yeah, I made my friends tacos, which is not a big deal, but it was kind of fun just to be able to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that what I find is important is just to also be grateful for where I'm at. Like, this has been a great thing for me, is just to be able to tell you, wow, I'm really lucky. And things you don't think about often are how lucky you are. You think about how difficult things are. But I think for people in general, especially around the holidays, but then not around the holidays, like, it's a good time to clean out. Anytime people hear this, it's a good time to like maybe clean out your closet. There's some clothes you've not worn, they're never going to fit again. And if they do, they're probably out of style unless it's a 20-year cycle. So maybe,
Yeah.
find a place to donate those in your community, and that's helping out locally. There's a lot of food pantries. You can clean out your pantry too. Like if something's going to expire, you're not going to use it because you bought 20 cans of green beans, you can let go
Yeah.
of some of those. And then I always think, if there's a cause that's important to you, reach out to that organization and see how you can help. And then if you don't want to help outside of your home or whatever, there's probably people in your home who just need to say hello, or in your family or your friends, or if you haven't reached out to them in a while because you thought, oh, I didn't reach out when I should have, and now it's too late. It's not too late. You can still do that. Just deal with the awkward moment of that, deal with the apology or non apology, give them, and move on. And then sometimes you need the care. So maybe it's just putting your clothes away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still like service, is making you stronger so you can be there for other people. Or if you live with someone and there's the dishes in the sink, you do them. Don't wait for them to do them.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be some grand gesture or some huge check that you write or anything like that.
No, we're all important, and we can all help in our own way. And I think people get overwhelmed, like what I do doesn't matter, and I try to stay away from that. And I was very much one of those people who say, oh, it's no big deal. No, it's a big deal to someone. There's someone you help that's a big deal to. Do it within your means. And if you have more means, then do more.
Yeah. And I've often felt that when I'm at my lowest, that if I reach out be of service to somebody else, even if it's just like picking up the phone and saying, how are you doing today? Kind of get out of my head and into doing something for somebody else or something else that really helps my psyche. And thinking about those small things, because it is. And then you mentioned being grateful for what you have and being aware of that. I just want to say I'm grateful to have met you virtually. Honestly, I feel like we're friends. Yeah. We share a lot in common in our podcasting journey and all of that. And same with Pam Uzel, who is part of the Squadcast crew, and she and I have been communicating after her being on my podcast. And I like our little podcasting community, and I think that is another way we both can give back.
Yeah.
I just am so grateful that you said yes to come on and tell your story, and that you let me drop that one episode that we did together and in the feed, because a lot of people have listened and said they really enjoyed it. Is there anything else you want to say before we?
Yeah, I thought of something. We both talked about, like, you could reach out and see how someone is. You can also, as an act of service sometimes, be honest with someone about how you're doing, because it might help them to help you. And that's not why you do it, but like, I think just thinking about our podcasting friends, and I've talked to Pam and she's talked to me, and I've talked to you and you've talked to me about even just like sharing, hey, I'm having a rough time with getting the podcast out this week or whatever. And then it gives the other person the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I've gone through that and here's what I've done or whatever. And I think there's something to be said too for being open to letting someone else in when you're struggling, not just like having to help them. So I guess that's the other thing. But yeah, I do enjoy listening to your podcast, because I think it's just, both of ours are similar in the way that we get stories out of people, just in a different avenue. And I think it's cool. And yeah, and thanks for sharing the episode that we did, so more people heard it and can just know you. I think it's cool they got to know you a little bit more through that conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope you have a wonderful stay with your friends there in Chicago and then California. How long are you staying? Through New Year's or?
Through the 29th, and I'll fly back. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've got some time, so enjoy. And I look forward to getting this edited and out into those people who are listening right now, into your earbuds and spending time with us. Oh, and one other thing that you can do as a service, dear listener, is if you like this podcast and you listen to More Than Work, Rabiah's podcast, if you would like and subscribe, and more than anything, share it with somebody that you think might really enjoy it, because that helps us in getting our stories and our message into that many more ears. And yeah, what we want to do to be of service. So thank you, Rabiah.
Thank you.
We'll chat soon. One of the many things I love about doing this podcast is not only do I get to experience the unique connection that my guests have with the beach, it's through that connection that I invariably find a new friend. And Rabiah's ideas of how we can be of service really resonated with me today. I'm reminded that I don't have to make a grand gesture to make a difference. Small ones can be just as impactful. Like making breakfast for friends, reaching out to a long-lost relative, or cracking jokes that make people laugh. So while you're thinking about what food you want to make, what relative you can call, or joke you can tell, there's one thing you can do for me right now, something small that can make a big impact. Click on the link to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, and sign up to be a member of the Beach Speaks Patreon community. For as little as $5, you can be a huge support to me in the production of this podcast and help more listeners reach the beach. The beach is speaking. Are you listening? Thank you for listening to this episode of The Beach Speaks. If you like what you heard, share the podcast with another beach lover. And speaking of sharing, I want to know how the beach is speaking to you. To record a message, just go to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, click the voicemail button, it's super easy, and I'll play it on the show. And if more beach is what you crave, visit thebeachspeaks.com or follow The Beach Speaks on Facebook and Instagram, where I post all my gorgeous sunrise photos and videos. It's another way for you to reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. The beach is speaking. Are you listening?